What's happening? Welcome to the 62nd episode of the Slapstream with Djordje, live from Slapsville. And it's always a different room, depending where I'm at the moment. I'm glad that you guys are still here, and thanks a lot for the support. Thanks a lot for subscribing. Thanks a lot for sharing these videos. If you haven't done that, please do that. Please click that subscribe button. Please slap that like button and help me out with the YouTube algorithm. And share these videos of these amazing and wonderful players that I really feel honored and privileged that I have a chance to tell their story or help them tell their story here on YouTube. And special thanks to all of you that decided to support the Slapstream via Venmo and PayPal. If you were so inclined to do that, click the link in the description of the video. And Patreon. Please check out the Patreon. I offer lots of cool perks and lots of cool things are happening in the near future. But without further ado, I would like to introduce my today's guest, very special guest, as always. You know that I always have the very special guests, and this is a guy that I discovered by accident. A friend of mine, Kevin Stewart, actually from Big Sandy's band. He gave me the CD, and he's like, oh, "You should maybe check out this guy." And it was years ago, maybe 15 years ago or so. Maybe exactly 15 years ago, because I remember that I was playing with Lemmy at the time. And I was like, oh, this guy is excellent. And I tried to get in touch with him back then and a couple times after that. And he's not very easily reachable. So this time I put a little more effort because I really wanted to bring him here into the Slapsville. And he's here with me online. So without further ado, this time for real, I would like to introduce John Marshall.
Hi, George.
Welcome.
Thank you. And thank you for spending 15 years trying to reach me.
Oh, yeah. Like, I mean, I tried like a few times because I also have that website, Art of Slap Bass. So I was thinking like, oh, I want to interview you here. And now I have this platform that I built on YouTube, and where I'm basically featuring all these great slap bass players. I was like, oh, yeah, now I'm determined. And your brother was very helpful with that. So, well, thank you for that.
Thank you to him, and thank you to you for being determined.
Oh, yes, I am that. When slap bass comes, I'm very determined. Not in many other areas of life, but like in slap bass, absolutely. So how have you been? How are you surviving this end of the world thing?
Well, you mentioned the pandemic, and it certainly was a good time to get in a few extra hours of slap bass during the week, and I think I got a little better than I was before the pandemic, but and a couple things I started working on is I didn't realize they're going to take a year or two for them to come together, but I'm trying to expand my technique a little bit.
Nice.
Well, so some of the rockabilly stuff, I've admired your videos many times, and getting more of the triplet in the right hand, because my previous decades, I was kind of lazy about the triplet, and I was kind of getting it with the left hand. So, so I've spent a year trying to get the triplet faster. So like, so is it okay if I play right now? And
sure, you can play.
Okay. So, that's where I am with the triplet right now, but
that's a pandemic, right?
But for so long, I just got the triplet with my left hand. So maybe that was the lazy man's way to the triplet. So there's good things. I mean, it's sure. Been hard. It's been a terrible time for some, but it was a chance to look at my technique again.
you know, we have to deal with it. So
Yeah.
you know, we're in this case, we're all in the same boat. So it is what it is. We're gonna talk about your technique, and you have like some special tricks that I definitely want to point out for our audience that it's not familiar with your name, John Marshall or Billy Bass. That's okay too, right?
Billy Bass is fine. I collect Billy Bass's pension
All
once
right.
a month, so Billy Bass is okay with me.
Awesome. So you've been a Billy Bass for like 20, 25 years, right?
Yeah, the band that I started there was gainfully employed for 25, almost 26 years at Disneyland. Yeah.
That's great. We're going to talk all about it, but I would like to start with your beginnings. How did you get interested in music, and how did you get interested in bass?
Well, so I was a classical violinist, and when I got to high school, my brother Evan, who we mentioned earlier because he was instrumental in connecting me to you, he started playing fiddle in a bluegrass band. And I think this is a scenario that maybe has brought a few people, maybe a few thousand people to the bass. There was no room in the bluegrass band for another fiddler. So the banjo player that we were working with, that he was working with, his name is Jonathan Blumel. And Jonathan's dad was, he was a very kind man, and he was also an instrument horse trader. And he had instruments coming in and out of the house, and out of the goodness of his heart, he lent me his K bass so that I could join the bluegrass band doing something other than playing the fiddle. And he gave me a few pointers, and the few pointers he gave me have stuck with me this whole time. I hate to say it, but it was almost 50 years ago that we were in the living room, and he pointed out how he plays the bass, and he was very relaxed. And I actually have a demo. I don't know how many other bass players started this way, but I'd like to show you what he showed me in his living room if I have room. So he would take his he had the highball glass here, and there was maybe some whiskey in it. And then he had a cigarette, which was that, you know, I just have a Sharpie because I don't smoke. But anyway, so he would hold the bass between his legs so that he could play. And then he played everything with a clench, right? I'm sure that there are some other bass players who play with a clench. So every note was played with this clench. So the point of the story is that by holding the bass between his legs, he always had a free hand for the highball glass. And when he was playing, but if he was singing, then he would hold the cigarette here, and maybe once in a while flick some ash. And that's pretty much where I got my technique. So when later in college, I added a little bit of classical fingering. But when I was, for the 20 some odd years I was Billy Bass, I did a lot of swinging the bass around, which of course is easier with a clench. So that's where my technique started.
That's your first lesson, huh?
That was the first lesson, and maybe a couple more times in his living room. He had a very relaxed slap where he just rolled his hand.
Oh, cool.
He just kind of roll it from his heel to the palm to the fingers, and it's something very, in the long term, it's been very ergonomically beneficial to have his easygoing perspective on the bass technique.
Well, it's important. I remember my first lesson. It was with no cigarettes, but I remember, I think it was some kind of alcohol involved. But it was similar holding technique, rockabilly, hillbilly technique, or whatever we want to call it. How old were you when you started playing bass?
16.
Oh, okay. And were you playing any other instruments before that?
Just I was a classical violin.
Okay.
From the time I was a student, from the time I was 10, and
okay.
I started playing a little bit of bluegrass fiddle.
Okay.
But like I say, the only room for me in the band was somebody had to play the bass. So,
but this is you, right?
That's me. So when I was Billy Bass, I actually did have the opportunity to pick up the fiddle and play the Orange Blossom Special and tunes.
Oh,
like
really?
That. Oh,
wow.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's not an easy one.
Well, especially for me.
Okay. Well, I wish I had a chance to see that band and see you slap in Disneyland for, you know.
Well, lots of Disney tunes. A lot of those.
I like that. I like going to Disneyland, actually. I used to have an annual pass. Unfortunately, not during the time when you were playing there. When was the last time you played there?
That would be 7 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We had our own theater. I mean, it was called the Golden Horseshoe Saloon, but
I know where it is. Yeah.
Yeah, that was our stomping ground for about 20 years. We had when we first came into the theater, we were playing on the dark days for the show that was called the Golden Horseshoe Review. It took its name from the theater. Okay. And that was a show that Walt created on day one of Disneyland. And it's still, in, as far as I know, in the Guinness book as the longest running theatrical show in history. So when they wanted something at Disneyland, they wanted something that they could put in on the days that the Golden Horseshoe Review was dark, and they asked me to put in a band that had a little bluegrass, a little comedy, a little singing. So that was our beginning in the Horseshoe. And then they retired the original Golden Horseshoe Review, and we had the theater all to ourselves for 10 or 15 years.
That's amazing. It seems that lots of bass players back in the day, especially, were involved in those kind of comedy, bluegrassy, country style bands, and I kind of fit Billy Hill and the Hillbillies, like in that kind of style.
Very much. In fact, the Maddox brothers, I think they used to have this thing where they'd line up and they'd pass the bass from one player to the next, and then there's that story about I think it was Colonel Parker who asked Bill Black to cool it a little bit on the comedy presentation. He was stealing too much focus from Elvis because he was doing a little bit of that hillbilly visual when he was slapping. And anyway, that's the story that I heard, that that they needed him to pull that back a little bit, the hillbilly shenanigans, so Elvis could do his thing. Have you heard that story?
I heard about it. I haven't heard that they called it, hillbilly or bluegrass or whatever. But it's, I heard that they asked him like to tone down at certain point, not at the beginning.
No, not at the beginning.
Yeah, Colin Parker was not there in the beginning. So yes, I heard about it. But I'm still happy that that all that shenanigans exist. So, but let's get back to Billy bass. I mean, John Marshall. So after you started playing bass, you never looked back. You never played fiddle professionally, right? Like you started playing bass and.
Well, I did go. I did go to Occidental College.
Mm-hmm.
I got a degree in classical violin.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then as soon as I got out with my classical violin degree, I found that it was a lot easier for me to get work as a bluegrass bass player.
Okay.
Than it was to get, and maybe that's just a reflection of how I played the classical violin.
Well, that's very competitive, like
yeah,
market. Like being a classical violin player, it's like, whew, it's not easy. Did you have any like formal education on bass as well?
No, just a couple of living room sessions with my friend Craig Blumel, the one who he was kind enough to lend me his K bass for.
Okay. That's the guy. All right.
Yeah, maybe he forgot to ask for it back, but I had that bass for 10 years, all during college. I had that.
Oh wow! Okay, great.
In the dorm room.
I'm sure that some of our audience is not familiar with your playing. So, do you mind like playing something?
Sure. So one of the things that we kind of stressed with the Hillbilly Band was taking familiar tunes and making them maybe a little more bluegrassy, so that when people either passing by or actually sitting in the theater, they would recognize not just the bluegrass standards, but that they would recognize songs from the park, or especially around Christmas time, they would hear bluegrass versions of the Christmas songs. So,
all right.
So here's a little, I'm going to do my favorite thing of leaning against the wall here. And so here's a little bit of Christmas music that we used to do. So there's a little bit of Jingle Bells. Let's see. It starts with Here Comes Santa Claus, which is. And then it goes to Jingle Bells. And then from there it goes to Rudolph. And from there it ends with Frosty. So here's a medley and a little bit of Christmas music. It starts with tuning. Okay. Merry Christmas, everyone.
All right. I love it. I love it.
Thank
I
you.
did a Jingle Bell slap bass version myself, but yours is cooler. I gotta say that. We're gonna be talking about your technique a little bit later. Just before we get into that, I would like to know, how did you develop that pull-off style of slap?
Well, there were two things. I think the idea that when I did solo, I had to stress melody, because that was maybe more instantly appealing to the passerby, the park guest. You know, for 10 or 15 seconds, I have to be more interesting than Splash Mountain, or or for 20 seconds, I have to be almost as interesting as Space Mountain or the Matterhorn. So when people would hear the melody kind of suspended in the context of the slap, they would recognize it, and they would stop, and that was, you know, that 15 or 20 seconds of stopping them on their walk from one section, from one land to the other. That was kind of my bread and butter. So I think when it comes to the melody, it's a little bit like what a banjo player does, in that the banjo player will take a vocal tune, and you'll hear the tune, but it's kind of suspended there in the context of a steady stream of 16th notes, say, or a steady stream of what they call Scruggs style picking. And so for when I did, so here's a little bit of I Saw the Light, Hank Williams. So the tune is, so I was trying to move my hand, keep the 16th notes and the triplets going, but still bring out the melody. So let's see if I can show you that. So then since you're playing with banjo, and I mentioned banjo, there's a few banjo tunes that people know. And again, trying to emulate that idea of a steady stream of rhythmic notes, but that there's a melody that kind of pops out of the pitch notes on the bass. So there's a tune called Ground Speed, and the tune is kind of it's a Earl Scruggs banjo tune, and it goes the melody something like very simple scaled down tune. So I listen to the banjo player, and maybe I can get kind of the same suspension of the melody in and amongst that steady stream of notes. So and I guess the fiddle tunes, there are certain fiddle tunes that people recognize, like Turkey in the Straw. And so that's another kind of melody where I try to keep the melody going and keep the steady slap going at the same time. So that would be, here's Turkey in the Straw. The melody, of course, goes. So here's a little bit of Turkey in the Straw. So sung melodies, fiddle tunes, banjo tunes, basically always trying to emulate the tune at the same time that I keep the pitch, the non-pitch slapping going.
It's amazing. It's great, and it's a couple things that you play that you use regularly in your playing, and those would be those pull-offs. Some of that like a double hand slap, two hand slap. It's not something that it's commonly seen with other bass players. So you just figured it out by yourself, or you heard it somewhere, or seen somebody else doing it?
I think it was mostly watching, if you're in a bluegrass band, you work with guitar players a lot, and the pull-offs and the hammer-ons and those things, they're very similar to what's going on in the guitar. Every bluegrass guitarist has kind of a repertoire of pull-offs and hammer-ons. And then, like I say, I never wanted to work so hard as to get the triplet. I mean, I've changed my mind, but at the time, I didn't want to have to do the triplet in the right hand. So it's just easier to do it.
But in that case, you're limited just to open strings.
That's true. And so then, but you can do different things with the left hand. You can. So you do have that space. So it was easier to just fill up that space with something on the left hand and still create that triplet.
I like your style. It's great. Have you ever seen anybody else doing something similar?
Once in a while, the guys that I used to work with at Disneyland, some guys that are really quite well known in the rockabilly circles. Like, I think you mentioned Kevin Stewart. Did you mention Kevin?
I mentioned Kevin. Yeah.
And I worked a lot with a fellow named Johnny Ray Bartell. Do you know Johnny Ray?
Yes, yes.
Well, there were Johnny Ray and Kevin and a few others would kind of come and go in the Disney scene. They weren't long-time, full-time employees like I was, but it was very pleasant having the different bass perspective that would come into the park for a little while, and then they would get their tours, and then they would leave again. And it was a nice situation to meet other bass players and also see other approaches to bass technique.
Absolutely. That's why I'm doing the Slapstream.
I'm so glad that you are.
Yeah. And I want to learn like from, all of you guys and share, hear all these stories because I cannot hear them anywhere else. I had to do this. So you got out of college, you played violin, and then you started playing in bluegrass bands. Anybody that you would like to mention?
Well, Evan Marshall, who was kind enough to work hard to connect you and me. Most of the bands that I played in were ones that he played in.
Mm-hmm.
We played in high school. We had a bluegrass band that we started in high school, and at San Gabriel High School, and the marching band director of all people at San Gabriel High School submitted our band for this competition at the Hollywood Bowl. Back then they had something called the Hollywood Bowl Battle of the Bands. And I think the most prestigious winners of the Battle of the Bands when I was in high school was a band called the Richard Carpenter Trio, and they eventually became the Carpenters. And so I knew about the Carpenters, and I knew about the Hollywood Bowl Battle of the Bands, and when the marching band director said, "Hey, I submitted you guys for the Battle of the Bands," we said, "Okay, we'll go." And so that band that won that year, my band was called Smokewood. And there you go. That's a beautiful picture of Smokewood. And that's Jonathan on the banjo. He's the one who was kind enough, along with his dad, to lend me the K bass. That's the K bass that I'm holding in the background. And my brother on mandolin, and Dan Ames on guitar. And it was one of those kind of things where when we won the Battle of the Bands, we got the crazy notion that maybe we could succeed as musicians and do it as a profession. And then I would say that for the long time that I was at Disneyland, that band pretty much occupied all my time. Evan Marshall, the mandolin player, actually composed a Pops concert program for Hillbilly Band and Symphony Orchestra. And so when we did get time off from Disneyland, we went out on the road, and we did some very beautiful symphony orchestra engagements. We played with the Buffalo Philharmonic. We played with the Houston Symphony, and it was a great hoot. But it wasn't until I retired from Disneyland that I started playing in some different bands. And right now the band I'm playing in is called the Miskey Mountain Boys. And that's what's occupying my time right now. Yeah, there we are. That's the that's kind of the first version. Most bass players know that band personnel changes faster than we change our bass strings, but that's Miskey in the middle, and me on the bass, and once again my brother Evan, and that's Dwayne Michaels on the far side, great fiddler from Disneyland.
Is he also from the Billy Hill and the Hillbillies?
Yes, he was with Billy Hill and the Hillbillies for a long time.
And since we're talking about Billy Hill, just to clarify, Billy Hill and the Hillbillies, that was the name that they were using at the Disneyland park. But when you were still playing with the same people outside of the park under a different name, right?
Well, we just dropped the Hill.
Okay.
When I formed the band, there's so much entertainment that comes in and out of the Disneyland entertainment mill, so to speak, and I just wanted to come up with the easiest name possible for them to remember. So I thought, well, they're looking for a hillbilly band, so I'll just take the first half of the word and make it the back half of the word. So that's how Billy Hill and the Hillbillies, and then we were all named Billy Hill. So that made it very easy for the. Let's just say that when they pulled that piece of paper out of the inbox, they could absorb everything there was to know about the band very quickly.
Got it. Interesting. All right. Good strategy. And it obviously worked. It was obviously good. So you mentioned that a personal changed, and then did you have like two basses in the band? What was the deal?
Yes, we do. Michelle, who is in our band, she's known as Miskey. There she is, right there, and she has this concept which is double bassing, right? And or sometimes we just refer to it as double. And then when we kind of cheesy it up by moving around and swinging the bass, it kind of becomes a double with cheese, which kind of also,
it's in and out reference.
In and out. Yeah. So
and you have so you're primarily a bass player, right, in a band?
Yes, that's right.
Oh, okay.
And I do fiddle, and then Miskey also plays the bass, and we do trade off most of the time, but then sometimes we're playing at the same time, and that's the double bass.
All right.
Djordje, there's another bass right here. I wonder, since Michelle is my producer, if I could get her to come up and slap. Would it be okay if we showed you?
Of course.
20 seconds.
She's up for it, yeah.
So,
but double with cheese, please.
Double with a little cheese, because a little cheese goes a long way. So there's this tune in. Do you need to put on your shoes?
I do.
There's this tune in the bluegrass repertoire called Blackberry Blossom.
Yep.
And it's kind of just a kind of a G scale going down. That's the melody, and it's like it's almost as if that scalar bass line is the tune. And so there's a moment in that where we trade off. I'm going to slide over a little bit. I hope that you can still see. So this is a little double with cheese. I don't know, not too much cheese. There you go. You're in the shot. There we go. All right, so this is a bluegrass.
I was not anticipating playing.
There it is.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Michelle.
Bye.
That was fun. So was the double or double with cheese?
That was the double.
That was the double with a little cheese.
So for the cheese, we have to come to your shows. So
That's
where
exactly
people
right.
can find out about your live performances?
Miskey Mountain Boys.
The MiskeyMountainBoys.com. Is it .com?
Okay.
Yep.
Yes, I'm sorry. I should know this better, but MiskeyMountainBoys.com.
All right. So please, people.
Oh, and we were talking about Disneyland. So,
Oh my gosh. Okay.
of course, I should mention that the last 5 or 6 years that we were there, Michelle, sometimes known as Miskey, she was our show director. And so that's how we started to exchange ideas about bass slapping. And one thing led to the Miskey Mountain Boys. So
nice. Well, I'm glad it did. And you're all based in Los Angeles, right?
yes,
Okay. So you were raised and born here?
I was a true Southern California hillbilly, born and raised in the backwoods of the Santa Monica Mountains. So
All right. Yeah. Well, that's a nice place to be born and raised. So when did you start? So you started working at Disneyland like 32, 33 years ago. So any other bands that you would like to mention like before you started working in Disneyland? I mean, Disneyland is such a big job and big commitment since you play there almost every day of the week which is great for a musician because you're based at home, but you're also not able to tour or like be involved with other music projects. I assume so, right?
Well, it's a valid assumption. I kind of had, I would say, looking back, it's kind of been a career based on amusement parks. I started at Magic Mountain right out of college, and then I worked for Knott's Berry Farm. There was a stint at Universal Studios, and then the longest engagement was for Disneyland. So I don't know. I think that's the big 4 amusement parks in LA County. So, or LA and Orange County.
Absolutely. And then were you playing with the same people, same band in all these parks?
Yes. Well, it was either called Smokewood or it was called Billy and the Hillbillies.
Okay.
And some of the same people, and some of the other people got other gigs. And but the one thing that happened when I retired from Disneyland, and this started back in about 2009, and then I was doing it full time for about 7 years. There was a show based on the music and life of Johnny Cash that played on Broadway, and it was called The Ring of Fire.
Mm-hmm.
And the star of the Broadway show, the late Jason Edwards, he formed his own touring company, and he took the show to a lot of the major theaters in the United States. There we go. That's the Ring of Fire from the Denver Center Theater. And Jason was not only a great actor and a great singer, but he also had at one time slapped the bass a little bit. And when he auditioned me, he really liked that particular style of playing the melody in the context of the slap style, and so he rewrote the show a little bit. And at the beginning of Act 2, where there is, like a lot of musicals, there's the entr'acte, which is where a lot of times it's like an overture that highlights the music and the songs from the first half, and it kind of gets the audience back into their seats and remembering some of the songs from the first half of the show. So Jason asked me if I would do a slap bass medley of songs from the first act as kind of a entr'acte overture to the second act. And I I had never in a million years would have thought that the director would want to open the second act with a guy standing out there slapping the bass for 2 minutes. But it worked, and it worked great. And I enjoyed doing that show all over the country at these beautiful theaters. And I had a great cast to work with. About half of the cast was from the original Broadway production. Most of them, I would say the majority of the musicians were from the original Broadway production. And our music director was the late Jeff Lisenby, who was the music director on Broadway. And we did some great theaters, and we had some marvelous times. And it all came to an end when my friend Jason passed away a few years ago. So, but so I think I could show you the medley of Johnny Cash tunes that opened the
Yes, please. Yes, please.
the second act. And let me take a quick sip of courage here. So this little medley has, of course, Folsom Prison Blues, Big River, 5 Feet High and Rising, a little snippet of Tennessee Flat Top Box, and then Will the Circle Be Unbroken? And here it is as a little bit of a bass slap overture.
Awesome. I love your playing. It's so cool. Can't wait to see you play live. Really. When is the next gig?
The next gig is coming up in 2 days. It's Sunday at the Coffee Gallery backstage in Altadena.
Okay. All right. In Altadena?
Yeah, in Altadena.
Okay.
Used
I'll
to
try
be
to check it out.
But we Altadena Incorporated maybe 50, 60 years ago. So now it's Altadena. So
Okay. I would like to ask you about your setup and all of that, but before we get into that section of the interview, I would like to know: have you ever encountered anyone, especially in bluegrass, telling you, "Hey, can you not slap?"
of course.
It happened or not?
Yes.
Okay.
Probably as many times as I've played with a bluegrass band.
Okay. I realized when I moved to San Francisco from Serbia in 2004, I played a lot of blues, and then I was slapping here and there. They would tell me, "Oh, you should not really slap, or you should just slap for solos." And then I found that for me, kind of slap solos always, and then slap for banjo, but then not to slap for if it's a mandolin solo. If it's a mandolin solo, I kind of like playing a little walking bass, and then whatever is the most simple thing for the singer. But I would like to know your experience. So they would tell you not to slap.
Well, my experience is very similar to yours, Djordje. The mandolin in the bluegrass band, they have the upbeat, it's called the chop, and sometimes I can get away with, just because the offbeat, the upbeat is so sharp and pronounced on the mandolin. If I'm playing straight eighths, I can make the hand slap coincide with the mandolin chop, and it almost blends into one sound, but it's different from like the swing eighth. So if I were going, if I was playing in tune, that might be the like you're saying, the walk up. If you slap it in the the two slaps per note. Yeah, somebody might say, you know, that's a little busy. Somebody in the band. If you can even out, you don't want to swing it because that's going to conflict with what the mandolin is doing. But if you can keep it straight, that's kind of the folk music eighth note. You know, like at a slower tempo, you would see maybe Dickie Smothers or one of the folk music bass players go and play that eighth note very straight. I like what you said about banjo players, because my what I so appreciate about the banjo is the way they suspend the melody and they communicate the melody to the listener in the context of a flurry of 16th notes. That's just a steady stream that goes on and on, but you do hear the melody within the context of that Scruggs style picking, and sometimes a more a little dynamics in the slap will help. If it's more and then save if you are accompanying the banjo player with like a double slap, the really loud double slap. Yeah, I would save that for your last day with the band.
I like that. I like hearing all those like bluegrass stories when they say, like, oh, you know, Bill Monroe didn't like slap. And then I found like the earliest bluegrass recordings and earliest Bill Monroe recordings were all with slap. Filmed at a hotel. So it's
a famous album, Flatt and Scruggs at Carnegie Hall.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
And
with Jake Tulloch on bass.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a duet, just Earl Scruggs and the bass.
Little Darling Pal of Mine.
That's that must be the track that I'm thinking of.
It is.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I love that. I like Jake Tulloch, and then his way of playing slap was.
That's
really
Cousin
cool.
Jake, right? Cousin Jake. Is that what we call him?
Yeah.
Cousin
Jake Tulloch. They used to have a festival with his name.
Oh yeah.
I don't think that exists anymore, but it was around for a bit.
Well,
that's what I remember when I was doing research on him. It's like, yeah, I have to find out everything about this guy. Like everybody who ever slapped. Really. So like, yeah, everything.
Well, and then it also is kind of the audience you're playing for, because if you're doing Blue Moon of Kentucky and it's a waltz and it's Bill Monroe, then you wouldn't have much room to slap. But if then the band wants to take it into a straight 4/4, and then it becomes the Elvis song, and then you can totally put the slap in there. So it's kind of bluegrass when it morphs into something that's along the peripheral of the bluegrass, then you have more license, I think. Or like me, for most of the time we were at Disneyland, I was the band leader, so I was able to put a little more bass slap in than maybe I otherwise would have.
Yeah, that's great. I would like. Do you write music?
A little bit.
Okay. Like bluegrass style, or what is the process of writing music?
I would say that my process of writing is I get an idea, I write it down, I put it in a notebook, and then I put the notebook somewhere where I can't find it. And that's basically I most of my creative energies go into what is not really writing original music, but just coming up with original arrangements, and both for the band and also for, you know, the two hands.
Sure. And it's great. Do you ever teach?
Not much. The couple of students that I had, my most recent student just became my band leader a couple of years ago. So I don't know. It's I haven't taught much, but I'm not adverse to taking students. But
so if people want to get in touch with you to get some lessons, the Facebook is the best way to do it.
I think Facebook through the Miskey Mountain Boys.
Okay.
Do I have a? Michelle is telling me that I have a web page.
Yes.
Oh,
yes,
I have a Facebook page. That's it.
Yes.
You're beginning to get the idea that I don't do very much of my own social media, but I'm getting more involved.
Okay, we're getting there. So John's Facebook page is in the description of this video. So
what's that?
Make sure to like it, follow it, and get in touch with him if you want to listen, or if you have a slap-based question or a Billy-based question. I would like to talk a little bit about your gear and your strings and bass and all of that. How many basses do you have?
I own 4 Engelhardt. The first one was my graduation gift from my parents when I graduated college. And it has a pretty low serial number. I think it's one of the ones where I think some of the wood was done by Mr. K, and it was very early in the transition. The bass was made very early in the transition to Engelhardt. And then my friend Tom Link, who was basically the luthier at Engelhardt, made me 3 custom basses. This is one. This is all curly maple. I have another one, the red one that I think is in some of the pictures, and we I played for him, and he came up with the idea of a double bass bar. So I have the normal bass bar, and then on this side, running almost next to the sound post, there's another smaller bass bar, and it really helped for me to be able to slap hard on that side and have the bass speak and kind of support the tone. And then I am now the happy co-owner of Tom Link's last 2 basses, as far as we know, the very last 2 that come out of the Engelhardt factory. And I co-own them with my musical partner, who just played the double with me, and she played on, I think, the second to last Engelhardt bass. And that's Thelma. And then we have Louise, which is, as far as we know, the very last bass to come out of the Engelhardt factory. And I think after that, they shut the doors, and I don't think there are any more basses coming with the name Engelhardt. As far as I know, right now, there aren't any more Engelhardts being made.
So Engelhardt is obviously your favorite bass, I assume so.
Yeah, I'm the K bass that I started on was, that's what felt like home. And then when we found out that Engelhardt was using all of the same forms and building all of the same, using the K prototype, it helps me to have the for the left hand stuff to have the really thin neck that you get on a K Engelhardt, where it's almost, if you see it, it's almost like it might be a little hard to see against that background, but the fingerboard is almost thicker or as thick as the actual neck itself. And then the fact that the shoulders slope down. This is Marilyn, by the way, and her shoulders are very shallow, and it gives me the chance to get in and get my hand around, and so and they I think the Engelhardts respond really well to gut strings, and this is a custom set of gut strings from Fantastic Music in Altadena. All the great stuff is happening in Altadena. And then the set of strings that I have on most of my other basses are the Parastro Corda, which are their gut, and they're made specifically for authentic Baroque performance. And they specifically, the factory specifically warns against using them for slap, which makes me want to slap them as hard as I can. And they respond well to it.
That's great. That's great. So do you have those strings on all four of your basses?
All four of the ones that aren't here, and then Thelma and Marilyn have the custom set from FMI, Fantastic Music.
Okay, all right. You're mentioning everything over there in that kind of like eastern area of Los Angeles. Is that where you live as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, in the shadow of the San Gabriel Mountains, and
okay.
We rehearse over here, kind of on the border between the San Gabriel Valley and the San Fernando Valley. It's all about the valleys, you know.
But it used to be in down Santa Monica Mountains. Is that what you said?
Well, that was a little bit of that was what my brother would call showbiz talk.
Ah, okay.
Stage talk. No. When I was in college, we used to hang out. We used to body surf at Zuma, and I guess I spent a lot of time going through the Santa Monica Mountains. But actually, I was born and raised in the shadow of the San Gabriel Mountains.
Okay. I'm sure that for most of our audience, they don't have a clue what is that. Is there a big difference? But if you live in LA, you know the difference. How about pickups?
So for the longest time, I was using the standard Underwood, the one, you know, that,
yeah,
the Underwood pickup that hasn't changed at all in decades.
Were you using one side or two sides?
Both sides.
Okay.
I think it was because just of my wanting to be able to slap quietly and still have to have the note be picked up on both sides. And this is, and see, Michelle, my director producer, she's going to tell me what she put on these two basses that we co-own. Fishman. And what's it called? Full Circle? No. Okay. Fishman Full Circle is what's on this bass. And then we used the Sans amp preamp on stage. And I think that also goes back a long time, and it hasn't changed much over the last couple decades.
And what's your favorite? What do you prefer, Fishman or Underwood?
You
I
know,
mean, do
the
you have
Fishman is new, and so not only am I starting to like it more and more, but also it's absolutely Michelle's favorite, and she's in the room. So I'm going to say the Fishman is really gaining my approval.
All right. But for the longest period of time you played Underwood.
Underwood for the first 30 years or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just for 30 years.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference for amps as well?
I would say that because of the theme park background and the fact that I was on so many stages where there wasn't backline or it was very restricted backline, I got used to the idea of playing without backline. Right now we're using kind of modified backline in that they're actually monitor wedges, but we turn them 180 degrees, put them behind us.
Okay.
It gives for us, it gives a little bit of it gives us a little bit of a more focused sound, because and that way the other players, the bluegrass players who don't want to hear slap in the middle of their banjo solo, it kind of focuses the sound more directly at us, because they're wedges and the tweeters and the horns are very what's the word I'm looking for? It's a more of a focused, the high ends are focused, very directional, so we can kind of aim them right at us and not at any of the other members of the band. But
so your band members sometimes don't like slap?
Well, if I showed up, I forget what they call it. I know that you must have used it many times, but the one they used to call a refrigerator, I think it was the Ampeg with 810s. The one that you wheel in, it's tilt back and it weighs, I don't know, several hundred pounds.
Yep.
That Ampeg stack, I think that would be probably the last day of the band if I showed up with a full rockabilly rig.
I actually use orange, but also 810s.
Yeah, I noticed in the video, and but it was the 410s in each cab.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a great sound. Yeah. We have 10-inch speakers in the forward facing monitors, and they do really well, but there's just not as many of them.
I like 10s for slap. Yeah, for sure. Do you have any way to warm up before the show, or you just start playing it?
Well, I would like to have more of a warm up before the show, but I think for the most part, my warm up is throwing cable for the other members of the band.
Well, that's some kind of warm up.
But when I do warm up, I think it's mostly just getting my wrist loose, and so that if there are any nerves that kick in, that I have my best chance of not getting any kind of repetitive motion injury. So I just try to get as loose as I can.
Is there anything that you can show us for kind of like a small lesson? Like, is there any John Marshall trick that you can show and explain how you're doing it?
Okay, sure. Well, so I do practice scales, and at one point when I was a much younger bassist, there was a jazz bassist named, I think his name was Niels Orsted Pedersen.
Yes.
And he had a 3-finger technique for his right hand. And I forced myself to learn 3 fingers. And I could never get it to go any faster than 2 fingers. So in that way, it was kind of somewhat of a failed enterprise, but it did do something which I think helps me when I'm not slapping, is that with the 3 fingers, it's much easier to avoid putting in an accent where you don't want it. So if you're trying to play a scale very smoothly and not put in an accent, say a first finger or second finger accent every 2 notes, that the 3 fingers keeps it acts independent of whatever it is you're playing. So if there is a note in the series of notes that's accented, it's by design. You have to think that I'm going to accent that note rather than having it just be a byproduct of a 2-finger technique. So that's helped me a lot as far as not the part of the technique that's not slapping. And I think that what's helped me the most, going back to when I first picked up the bass, has been the idea that you try and take as much tension out of your playing, and especially out of the slap, as possible. And mentioned in warm-up that whatever tension is in my hands and my arms going into the show, whether it's from moving speakers or arguing with stagehands or whatever it is, which I don't do, but if I were to, it just is my best defense against any kind of repetitive motion injury. And I have to say that some of the people I played with over the long term, who also spent a long time at the amusement parks, they did run into quite a bit of repetitive motion injury, and it was instructive to me to maintain that loose approach. And the drummers, they let the sticks do the work for them for the most part. And my son is a drummer, and I used to sit in his lessons and watch him get drum lessons. And every week the teacher would say, you got to let the sticks do the work for you. So I kind of let the fingerboard and the strings kind of do the work for me. And hopefully that keeps my hands healthy.
That's a good advice. Thank you for sharing that. There were like a couple more questions that I wanted to ask you. Who would you say was the biggest influence on your bass playing?
I should know that, right? I should know the answer to this.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe you have like a multiply. Maybe you don't have any.
Well, I guess when I thought I was going to do more pizzicato and less slapping, I would say that Niels Orsted Pedersen he played with my favorite violinist, my favorite jazz violinist at the time. His name was Stefan Grappelli, right?
Yeah, the only one.
Yeah. He is the reigning master for all time. As far as the slap bass, I would just say that when I was exposed to slap bass, the way I would say a lot of people are, like when you look at the vintage clips of Elvis and the vintage footage of Johnny Cash and Marshall Little standing on his bass on the cover of Rock Around the Clock, you know, I think he's on the album cover, he's standing on the bass. And hearing that bass slap in Rock Around the Clock, and that's kind of I was excited about getting into bands that were not just bluegrass, but wanted to do a little bit.
Were you playing
of
any rockabilly bands? Any
not straight ahead rockabilly, but just, you know, bands where we do Blue Moon of Kentucky as a waltz and then go into the 4/4 and that sort of thing.
I feel that some bluegrass bands do that too, right?
Oh yeah, I think that
it's now it's acceptable to play in 4.
Yeah, and you know,
Blue Moon of Kentucky.
When I mean, it was lucky for me that Lee Rocker and Brian Setzer sold 5 million records with this lick in it, because in 8 notes I could get just about anybody who was walking by to stop and look at me and go, whoa, that guy plays rockabilly. So
yeah, Rock This Town was big. I wish there were more rockabilly songs like that, you know, can grab mainstream audience attention. Do you like any slap bass players nowadays?
Well, other than you, I would say that most of my influence these days comes from just more like going further back as opposed to right now. But I've made a promise to my bandmates to be a little bit more aware of where the state of the art is now. And in that regard, I'm very thankful for a wonderful resource like yours, like the Art of Slap Bass and the Slapstream. It was only maybe a few years ago that I started listening to Thelma Terry and maybe, you know, the Maddox brothers from the 40s, and realize that so much of what I do was, you know, necessity is the father of invention, and that when Thelma was pulling the string out as far as she could, instead of pulling it towards her, she was pulling it out, that she was just trying to be heard almost as well as the tuba. If you listen to some of the Louis Armstrong records from the early 30s, he's still using tuba for the bass. And also that, you know, if you are with no amplification, you're trying to make the bass heard over the rest of the 6-piece combo, or over the trombone or the clarinet or the cornet. And then some of the earlier recordings, you can hear where her hand comes back, and it's kind of slap, I would say slap, snap, slap, snap, and realize this wasn't just them coming up with a gimmick. This was necessary. This was survival. This was being heard above, or at least as part of a combo, a big combo with a lot of wind instruments. And so I have become a little bit more educated about the roots of slapping, and now I look forward to being more well-informed about the current state of the art.
So these 62 episodes are perfect way to start.
They are perfect.
Oh, I forgot now, since you mentioned snap, slap, snap, slap, I forgot that I wanted to ask you one more thing. And I'm glad, thanks for reminding me. what are the different patterns that you are using when you play slap, and how do you usually name them? Are you using that single slap, double slap, triple slap technique? I mean, name of for these different slap patterns, or are you using something else?
Well, that's a great question, and one that I was going to ask you, because
well, I can tell you how I do it, and then but my thing is that I want to find out what is the other people's approach. I spend lots of time thinking about this, so I do have my own way of.
Well, now I noticed in your blog, or in one of the chat sequences on the website, that there were a couple of bass players throwing around terms relating to drum rudiments, like a roll, I mean a rough or a paradiddle and that sort of thing. So I think, having sat through my son's drum lessons a few times, that 3 hits with the right hand and 1 hit with the left hand, that a drummer would call that a paradiddle. And so maybe I will finally get around to labeling some of the stuff that I do. And I think maybe double slap, triple slap, those are good reference points. But maybe I'll go back and refer a little bit more to the drum rudiments, because I think a rough, this is where I'm kind of getting on thin ice, because I should remember a lot more from those drum lessons, but I actually managed to sleep through a lot of them. And but I think the rough is two unpitched notes and then a pitched note on the bass. I think it's 2 small notes and a big note on the snare drum. If I sound like I'm floundering a little here, Djordje, it's because I was hoping that you would have a terminology that you use and I would absorb it.
Well, I do. I said it many times. But let's do this. Can you show me the different patterns that you're using for
Sure.
slap?
So if this is a paradiddle, this is, so there's one. Of course, this is the standard 4/16 notes, or what Johnny Cash called the boom chicka boom. So there's the snap, and then 2 unpitched notes, and then the added 16th, the second 16th in the pattern is from the left hand. So that's a total of 3 unpitched notes to every pitched note. Like we were talking about Thelma Terry, that's only 1 unpitched note for every pitched note. The triple slap, like I told you, that I'm working on, that's 3 2 unpitched notes and a pitched note. The nice thing about the swung single slap is that there's always room, and this is probably the essence of my technique, is that it's easy to wedge in the 3rd note in the triplet. So that's that pattern. And I think that's pretty much, if you boil it down to the basics. There's a lot of stuff happening in the left hand, and it took me quite a few years to develop the strength to do hammer-ons and pull-offs on the bass. And I think the hardest part was to be able to pull it hard enough that it gives it the character of a slap note. So that's not just a pull off, but there's actually a slap to it. So those are the basic patterns that I use. Now,
I like that.
my friend Michelle, who's I think you're going to have her sometime before you get to a number 100 of your episode. She's actually taking some of the Baron patterns from the Irish music, and she's moving those onto the bass. And that's probably a little bit more complicated than my rhythmic approach.
Well, I can't wait to see that. I pretty much asked you everything I wanted to ask you. I have one more question, but before that, I would like to hear you play a little more. And then I would like to ask you, is there anything else that you wanted to mention that I haven't asked you, that I missed?
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay, so is there anything that I missed that you wanted to mention?
Just MiskeyMountainBoys.com, which you did not miss, but I thought I would mention it one more time. And
the show is tomorrow on Sunday. So
yes, on Sunday. That's right. Sunday it is.
Yes. Excellent. What you gonna play?
Okay, so let me see. What else should I play? I'm gonna back up against the wall because that's my favorite way to play. You can tell the houses where I've played and jammed is there's usually one wall that has a little spot that's rubbed away. The paint's rubbed away. Okay, so let me just tune in. While I'm tuning, I'll think of. So there's an old bluegrass tune called Golden Slippers. And so here's a little bit of Golden Slippers. A little bit. Let's see. I wanted to play in a different key, maybe. So here's a little bit of Rocky Top, but it's not a long solo. It's just when they point at you and go, okay, bass.
Awesome. I love your playing. Can't wait to see you play live, and I'll try to make it tomorrow to Altadena. It's on my list. My last question is, like, you've been playing for such a long time and you had like such a successful career. What would you say that still inspire you to do what you do?
Well, I would say I would just quote Willie Nelson and say, "The life I love is making music with my friends." That's plenty of inspiration. And like I say, the fact that I have a little bit of a subsidy for the arts coming from my pension that I get from Billy Bass, that's nice. It helps free up the time so I can do more playing and make more music with my friends.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for being a part of the Slapstream here live in Slapsville. I can't wait to see you play live, hopefully tomorrow, and then we're gonna chat more slap. Good luck with everything.
Thank you, and thank you so much, Djordje, for having me on today.
Of course. Thank you. All right, that was John Marshall, Billy Bass. John Marshall. I prefer John Marshall. But for all of you that maybe have seen him at the Disneyland, you probably remember him as Billy Bass, and you definitely remember him as by his amazing slap bass playing. And as you heard, and you can check out the link below, you can find out about his gigs and like his Facebook page, follow him, and do all of that. And then you know that you're gonna have a chance like to see somebody amazing on slap bass. I love his style. Thanks for all of you that have been with me for the 62nd episode of the Slapstream with Djordje, live from Slapsville. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, make sure to do that now. I'm waiting. If you hit it, if you haven't hit it, make sure to do that. And slap that like and help me out with the YouTube algorithm. Special thanks goes to all of you that donated via PayPal and Venmo and Patreon, especially Patreon. Check out the Patreon. I offer lots of cool things over there. And I believe that's, oh, no, I forgot to mention the Art of Slap Bass t-shirts. Here they are. I kind of like the black one now. I used to wear the red one for a long time, but now I dig the black one. Don't forget, never fret. Slide it in smooth and keep it in a groove. This is Djordje, and I will see you next Saturday.